Welcome to another Great War Battlefield 1 trailer analysis. You guys liked the other ones we did so much, we figured we'd better do another one about the two new expansion packs, the French and Russian content, which are called They Shall Not Pass and In the Name of the Tsar. This is really fun to talk about lesser known aspects of the war anyhow. And as a little sort of insert here, Marcus and I actually wrote a whole bunch of the codex that pop up on the screen as freelancers for DICE. Just wanted to put that out there. Russian first. Our trailer begins with the words of Andreevna Akhmatova, a famous Russian poet. "You will hear thunder and remember me." And think, she wanted storms. "The rim of the sky will be the color of hard crimson, and your heart, as it was then, will be on fire. A knife is drawn in anger." The knife is actually a dagger, a Caucasian Cossack dagger. So our protagonist here might be a Caucasian Cossack. We see an armored train rushing through a snowy landscape. It appears to be the Zamoretz. The Zamoretz was a monster even for an armored train, with up to 16 millimeters of armor powered by two 60 horsepower gasoline engines and armed with 76.2 millimeter Putilov guns. Now it saw a lot of service and redesign. First developed for the Imperial Russian forces in 1916, and then the Red Guards captured it, and in the end it was used by the Czech legions to cross Siberia under the name Orlik. Now, you might think that armored trains are a pretty weird idea, but in World War I and the Russian Civil War, they played a major role. And no, you cannot just go and blow up the tracks and walk away if the tracks are the only supply line for you and your enemy. Another thing we can spot are the round pole fences, which are typical for Scandinavia, but are also common in some other Baltic regions, mainly in Estonia. Two Russian Sikorsky Ilya Muromets are flying through the clouds. The Russian Air Force had those powerful four-engine bombers pretty much from the start of the war. Those planes could transport up to 16 passengers, they had a bedroom and even a toilet. The biggest versions could transport a bomb load of 800 kilograms, which is a heck of a lot, that's like 1,800 pounds, and defend themselves with 9 machine guns. With an armor up to 5 millimeters, these were really the first flying fortresses. It was also the first airplane with an enclosed cockpit. We see the Galician battlefield and what looks like Putilov Garford armored cars. They had a 4x2 wheel chassis. They were more like trucks than cars, actually. Around 48 saw action on the Eastern Front, and they were used as shock troops, with a single 76 millimeter mountain gun and 2 Maxim guns on the sides. Now, they might be going a bit too fast here, since their underpowered engines really allowed you only to go to about 10 miles an hour, that's 16 kilometers an hour, on good roads, and not the muddy Galician countryside. Generally, armored cars played an important role on the Eastern Front. You might have heard of the illustrious Belgian Armored Car Division, for example. The Germans also used them in Romania. Galicia itself was an extremely important battlefield several times during the war. At the beginning, the Russians and Austro-Hungarians suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties there at the Battle of Galicia. And in 1915, 16, and 17, the war would return to this important region. Some Lancers coming up. One on the right is wearing what is called a papaka hat. Those were widespread among troops from the Caucasus, so we might see a Circassian Lancer or a Kuban Cossack here. Cossack cavalry was used against the Germans during the Gorlice-Tarnów offensive and had a psychological effect, but they were also very skilled riders just in general, and cavalry naturally played a big part on the huge open spaces of the Eastern Front. Cavalry could be used for surprise attacks, to rout the enemy, or for scouting ahead. Armored trains actually would have cavalry support scouting ahead. This is the General Liu rifle, a Chinese design. You might be thinking, what does China have to do with the First World War? But apart from the siege of Qingdao in 1914 and the Chinese Labor Corps on the Western Front, there was a lot of stuff going on in China during the war. So much stuff that it's already confusing just thinking about it. You guys should definitely look it up, and we did a special about it, so you can check that out. Just use the search function. We see someone working the German MG-1417 light machine gun. The Parabellum MG-14 was a redesign of the MG-08. The water cooling system was replaced, the recoil was reduced, and instead of a belt feeding system, the ammunition was enclosed in a drum magazine. It could fire 700 rounds a minute, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was any good to be used in ground combat. The choice to replace the water cooling system meant that it would overheat fairly quickly, which is one reason why the MG-14 was generally used in aircraft. Next to the powerful double-barreled shotgun, we can spot French 155mm de Bagne artillery in the background. Those were effective, but also pretty old artillery pieces from 1877. Close to 180 of them were given to Russia. We see a quick German advance towards an artillery position. The wide angle of the guns tells us of foes far away, maybe at sea, and we see 2 radio towers, which indicates a substantial position. From the other released promotional material, I would guess that this is a scene from Operation Albion, the German amphibious operation in the West Estonian archipelago. This happened around 100 years ago, and of course we talk about it on our show really soon. You can also see a biplane attacking. The Russians used a variety of planes on the Eastern Front, and the German Luftstreitkräfte were also used extensively, mainly for recon operations. You can see the Imperial Russian emblem on that Sopwith. Interestingly enough, during the Battle of Riga, a lot of Russian pilots were arrested by the Bolsheviks for being part of the upper class. So the Russian Air Force was pretty much diminished before the actual landing of the German troops had even begun. And the landings didn't look much like this. This looks too much, to me, like Omaha Beach, which was some 30 years later. The woman we heard speaking earlier is revealed here. From her military haircut, she seems to be a member of one of the Russian women's battalions of death. The first one was founded by Maria Boshkareva in 1917 and fought in the Kerensky Offensive. Another women's battalion was in Petrograd during the October Revolution. Listen to the sound in the fields, the howling of those fearsome soldiers. They are coming into our midst to cut the throats of your sons and consorts. To arms, citizens, form your battalions. March, march, let impure blood water our furrows. And as you no doubt guessed, this was the Marseillaise, so we are now talking about the French. The French soldier is wearing the standard field cap and not the obligatory modern Adrian helmet. He looks pretty ragged. Maybe he symbolizes one of the veterans that fought from the beginning of the war all the way to the end. The medic running past him is wearing his Adrian helmet. The French were actually the first to come up with a military helmet in World War I and introduced this in 1915 already. The medic is holding a Fusil Automatique Model 1917 semi-automatic rifle. Initially, this rifle was not well received by the French soldiers, but a later version in 1918 improved on the drawbacks. We see some soldiers engaged in underground warfare, probably at Fort Vaux. Those clean conditions were actually perfect for the Shoshab machine gun that was so vulnerable to mud and dirt because of its open magazine. A soldier is blown sky high, or ceiling high as the ceiling allows it. That underground warfare at forts like Vaux was fighting at the absolute limits of what humans could endure. The gas and the fumes from all the grenades and the flames would make it hard to breathe. And most of the time, it was dark as night in there because the electricity was gone and oil lamps could not be lit because of all the smoke and the gas. The hand grenade was also the weapon of choice there. Fort Vaux was one of many forts that made what you call the Iron Belt in the Verdun area. The Germans wanted to take Verdun in February 1916, so they needed to take all of these forts one by one. Fort Vaux was one of the most contested ones, and the French fought there without any resupplies. They actually had to lick water from the walls to survive. That dip towards the ground was actually one of the Saint-Chamon's most dangerous exercises. France's second tank was pretty cumbersome and nose-heavy due to its 75mm field gun planted at the front. It performed pretty poorly during the French offensives in 1917. Many fell prey to the German defensive artillery. They were redesigned in 1918, and they also changed their role from the typical tank to being more of a mobile artillery platform, in which they were actually quite effective. But many were just scrapped as supply and support tanks at that point. It was running on a gasoline electric engine, actually, and was very, very slow. One Saint-Chamond actually exists today, and you could see it at Tank Fest 2017 or in the 2017 military parade in France. We see a large tank advance. One of the smallest tanks of the war, the Renault FT, alongside one of the biggest, the Char 2C. The Char 2C, or the Char d'Assaut de Grand Modèle, was not only grand in name, it weighed 69 tons and was over 10 meters long. That's over 30 feet long, right? It sported 4 Hotchkiss machine guns and a powerful, shortened 75 cannon. It was in production since December 1917 and was supposed to lead charges of the 1919 offensives, which of course never happened. But a few prototypes existed. There are similar designs by the British, and if the war would have continued, it likely would have transitioned to these rolling fortresses. Such a tank offensive as we see here would be something that happened in the final months of the war, after, say, Hamel, when a real combined arms doctrine was developed, when the true purpose and strategy for the tank was developed, and when the tank was reliable enough to be fielded in such big numbers. Still, this would all happen much slower. All these explosions actually remind me of one of my favorite World War I poems, written by probably my favorite World War I poet, Private Baldrick. I think I remember his poem, The German Guns. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Ils ne passeront pas. They shall not pass. The famous sentence spoken during the Battle of Verdun is often associated with Philippe Pétain, but was apparently said by General Robert Nivelle. It was the slogan for the defiant French defense of the region. You can actually see it written on the monument at the Mortaume in the Verdun region, which is a very powerful monument. And if you're anywhere near there, you should definitely check that out. A field of poppies, native to the countryside of Flanders. The poppy soon became the symbol of the fallen British soldiers, and is nowadays one of the official symbols of remembrance in Great Britain. This gun seems to be the Ribeyrolles 1918, or Carabine Mitrailleuse. It was one of the first automatic rifles designed by the French, using a new experimental caliber and a straight blowback system. It was a mix between a carbine and an automatic support rifle like the show shot, but it came too late in the war to gain a real distinctive role. A heavy shell is loaded. People underestimate how heavy those shells were. For those howitzers, it could be from 130 up to, say, 350 kilos. And this howitzer seems to be an Ordnance BL 9.2-inch howitzer, a British model, not used by the French, at least as far as I am aware. The French artillery did not use such siege howitzers, at least not in large numbers. They preferred heavy mortars, field artillery, and train artillery instead. That medieval-looking guy actually has a real-life counterpart. He resembles a nettoyeur de tranchées, a so-called trench sweeper. They were special forces of France, ordered to destroy nests of resistance after a successful attack. Very few pictures of them exist, and they show some of them wearing hardened leather or steel plates as body armor. Those goggles, in combination with the scarf, are either a primitive version of a gas mask or protection against splinters. Since they engaged the enemy in close combat, they relied on large amounts of hand grenades and a wide variety of knives and clubs. But overall, the French never really deployed these super specialized assault troops like the Germans or the Italians did. They pretty much developed modern infantry tactics throughout the war and were relying more on universal platoons. And the final shot also resembles a very famous propaganda card of the time: the defiant stance of the French soldiers in front of a burning and devastated landscape. A cool detail here is the black French soldier on the right. He would probably be a member of the Senegalese tirailleurs. These soldiers from Senegal, but also the other colonial soldiers from the Maghreb region, would be on the very front during some of the attacks at Verdun. Algerian troops also experienced the first German gas attack on the Western Front. You can see them on a lot of propaganda cards as well. Again, the defiant stance of the French soldier is also from this time and comes back to the "they shall not pass" that became famous after the Battle of Verdun and also spread to other fronts afterwards. All right, well, that is it for now. I'm sure I'll hear loads and loads of things from you in the comments below, and feel free to write about just about anything. If you'd like to see our first BF1 trailer review, you can click right here for that. And I'm sure I will hear lots of things from you in the comments, and me and Flo and the gang, we really look forward to it. All right, see you soon.